What's happening, Hardscapers? Today we're going to be talking about polymeric sand failure. I have a project that I went to a couple of years ago when I was still doing a lot of maintenance work. This client reached out, said that they had a polymeric sand problem. They wanted me to provide a solution. So I'm going to walk through what I did here and why I did it. Let's get into this. So polymeric sand, when it's installed properly, should last many years. There's no reason why it should not, especially with how well the evolution of the product has come since the early 2000s. When installed properly, you should not be able to use a knife to penetrate into the sand. It should be solid as a rock. It's also flexible enough so that in the freeze-thaw cycles that we experience up here in the north, that it will stay bonded to the stone and stay intact with any movement that may be experienced. But as you can see here with this project, this is not the case. I'm able to get my knife all the way into it, scrape out some, and then feel that it's nice and loose in my gloves here. And this is a major problem, and there could be many different reasons why this is happening. One reason for this, and we can't really decide this because we weren't the ones to install this project, but it could be due to poor installation practices. This could be just because it was watered incorrectly. Every manufacturer has a certain set interval time that you will actually spray that product down for, how many passes you do, and so on. So always follow the bag for the manufacturer's instructions for that particular polymeric sand. In this certain instance, the polymeric sand wasn't filled too high in the joint. It was about 1/8 of an inch below the top of the paver, so that is not a problem. So the installation was followed fairly well there. So the next thing we typically look if we're trying to solve this problem would be the base material. In this case, we actually see that they used HPB as a bedding layer and a dense graded base below it, which is fine. That works well to allow for drainage to occur underneath that polymeric sand if any water gets in, but especially once that polymeric sand is activated with water, we need to make sure that that polymeric sand is going to dry, set, and cure over a certain period of time. If this was stone dust used as that bedding layer, or even worse for that base, that would not allow for the free drainage of water through that material, and water would stay there underneath the stone and in that joint, causing the polymeric sand to eventually fail as it doesn't get a chance to dry out fully. However, we did talk to the client as well, and they said that it did cure when it was first installed. It's just over time it became more and more loose. So that just tells us that we might have a moisture problem, or this project was installed in a very shaded area. And this is the case for this project. The video doesn't show it quite too well, but this is a very small backyard patio in a townhouse setting, and surrounding it is a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation, and it just doesn't get enough sunlight to allow that area to dry out. So if I were to install polymeric sand in this area, I would consider a few things prior to installation. We've already mentioned having the right base material and the right bedding material, but slope becomes a major factor when we're factoring in not getting a lot of sunlight directly onto this patio. ICPI recommends a 3/16 of an inch per foot slope for a paver project. I myself personally prefer to opt for a 1/8 of an inch per foot slope on my patios, especially when we're dealing with a smooth surface product. However, a textured surface product, we might opt for a 3/16 of an inch per foot slope. And then in a shaded area, especially with a textured surface product, we will opt for a 1/4 of an inch per foot slope to ensure that that water that gets onto that surface really makes its way out, away from the foundation and off the surface of the project. What will happen is that water will sit on that surface, and without that sufficient slope, will just sit there and allow for a growth of moss, mildew, mold, everything that can get on that surface to grow will grow, and we'll get something that looks like this over a time of 3 to 5 years. And this is the case for the client, and this is exactly what has happened. So there's a few solutions that we can provide the client to help them mitigate this from happening. We can inform them about the slope, talk about lifting the stones and applying that slope to the surface, but this typically doesn't go over too well with a client that has just spent a lot of money on their patio, and being informed that it would be best to then apply that slope that should have been applied in the first place. Especially in this project, we would really have to redo the whole entire base with the way that the previous contractor actually laid this stone at the starting point at the foundation of the house. It is already higher in some cases in front of the doorstep. So this turns into a major renovation project, but we let the client know that this is the best step to help them in solving this problem, especially in the future, for it to happen. And if the client doesn't do that, I can do a pressure washing, get all that polymeric sand out, wait for a few days of really hot sun, install new polymeric sand, and hope that it sets and cures, but informing the client the risks that they take on in doing that, and in a few years they could be left with the exact same thing. In my business nowadays, I wouldn't even give them that option. I would hand them off to someone else. But just a couple of years ago, I was that guy that got it handed this type of project, and I would do that pressure washing in replacement of polymeric sand, still letting the client know the risks of doing that. Now, there are permeable jointing compounds that you could install into the joints if they are wide enough to allow for them, but in this case, I do not install those permeable jointing products into projects that I haven't done the base. I just don't know exactly what that base looks like, the slope away from the foundation for the subsoil, the excavation, and everything that goes into that, so I don't bother with that unless I've touched the base, unless I've installed the base. And so we pressure wash, we replace the polymeric sand, and we're left with something that looks more like this. In comparison to the before picture. If you enjoyed this video at all, please give this video a like. Comment below any questions that you have, anything that you want to add to anything that I've said in this. I'll reply to anyone and everyone that responds. We've also got a membership platform on members.howtohardscape.com. The link is in the description below. You can learn about this as well as many other installation courses that we have up there, including installing interlocking concrete pavement, retaining walls, gas fire features, lighting, and so much more about being able to run your hardscaping business. And if you aren't already subscribed, the How to Hardscape podcast is a great resource that I bring on industry experts to interview and to really dissect their business and what is working for them so that you can apply it into your own business. And if you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe for more hardscaping content. Thank you so much for watching.